thank you very much, and thank you for the honor of summarizing the findings of an ambitious synthesis of American energy solutions that I think could be adapted to many other countries, including here in Catalunya. 60 colleagues and I did this work during 6 quarters with much help from industry on content and peer review, building on 3 decades of experience in all the areas I'll describe. And we summarized our findings in a business book called Reinventing Fire that was published 2 years ago. And it's a grand synthesis that began by asking big questions like, what if we could make energy do our work without working our undoing? Could we imagine fuel without fear? Could we reinvent fire? And we chose that big poetic title because long ago fire made us human, then fossil fuels made us modern. But now we need a new fire that makes us safe, secure, healthy, and durable. That is now practical. In fact, it works better and costs less than what we are doing. So let's see how. 4/5 of the world's energy still comes from burning each year 19 cubic kilometers of the rotted remains of primeval swamp goo. As a National Petroleum Council member, I should tell you, and it's true, that those fossil fuels have built our civilization and created our wealth and enriched the lives of billions of people. But their rising costs to our security, health, environment, economy are eroding, if not outweighing, their benefits. So we need a new fire. And switching from the old fire to the new fire changes 2 big stories, oil and electricity, each of which puts 2/5 of the fossil carbon into the air. These are distinct stories. In my country, they're less than 1% linked, but the uses are similarly concentrated. 3/4 of U.S. oil fuels transportation, 3/4 of U.S. electricity powers buildings, the rest of both runs factories. So very efficient transport and land use and buildings and factories can save a lot of oil and coal and natural gas to displace both. But today's energy system is not only inefficient, it's also aging, dirty, and insecure and disconnected, and it needs refurbishment. But by 2050, it could become efficient, connected, and distributed with elegantly frugal vehicles, buildings, and factories, all depending on a secure, modern, and resilient electricity system. So we can eliminate our addiction to oil and coal by 2050 and use 1/3 less natural gas while switching to 3-fold more efficient use and 3/4 renewable supplies. That's the transition I'll describe for the United States, but I work in 50-odd countries, and I think you'll find that the U.S. solutions have considerable resonance, opportunity, adaptability to many other societies. Now, by 2050, we found that this transition in the United States, for example, could cost $5 trillion less in net present value than business as usual, counting all external or hidden costs at 0, a conservatively low estimate. And yet this cheaper energy system could support a 158% bigger economy, all without needing oil or coal, or for that matter, nuclear energy. And this transition would need no new inventions and no acts of Congress and running Washington gridlock, because instead it's led by business for profit. It uses our most effective institutions, private enterprise co-evolving with civil society, sped by military innovation, to go around our least effective institutions. And whether you care most about profits and jobs and competitive advantage, or about national security, or about environmental stewardship, creation care, public health, climate protection, strong communities, reinventing fire makes sense and makes money. Now, General Eisenhower reputedly said that in expanding the boundaries of tough problem, makes it soluble by encompassing more options and more synergies, including what the solution requires. So in Reinventing Fire, we integrated all 4 sectors that use energy: transport, buildings, industry, and electricity. And we integrated 4 kinds of innovation, not just the usual 2, technology and public policy, but also 2 even more powerful ones normally left out, namely design, the way we combine technologies, and strategy, new business models, new competitive strategies. And these combinations give much more than the sum of their parts, especially in creating some deeply disruptive business opportunities. Where to start? Well, the United States spends $2 billion a day to buy oil, plus another $4 billion a day for the hidden economic and military costs of its oil dependence. And cars used, or automobiles, use nearly half the oil. So let's start by making autos oil-free. 2/5 of the energy needed to move a typical car is caused by its weight. And each unit of energy we save at the wheels by taking out weight or drag or rolling resistance saves another 6 units of energy we don't need to waste getting it to the wheels. So it leverages 7 units of fuel savings in the tank. But for the past quarter century, epidemic obesity has made our 2-ton steel autos gain weight twice as fast as we have. Happily, today we have ultralight, ultra-strong materials like carbon fiber composites that can make dramatic weight savings snowball and can make autos simpler and cheaper to build, as I'll explain. And lighter, more slippery autos need less force to move them, so their engine gets smaller. And then you can afford to electrify them because you need about 3 times fewer of the costly fuel cells or batteries. So they get smaller, lighter, and cheaper, and the price of the car converges towards today's value, while the driving cost per kilometer gets much smaller. So that specific sequence of innovations can transform automakers from wringing tiny savings out of essentially Victorian steel stamping and engine technologies to the steeply falling costs of 3 mutually reinforcing technologies: the ultralight materials, their manufacturing techniques, and electric propulsion. And if you are exploiting 3 steep and synergistic learning curves while your competitor is out on the flat part of one learning curve, you win. This also turns out to de-risk the auto business very substantially. Now, sales of ultralight electric autos can grow faster and their costs can drop faster with a public policy called feebates, temporarily, though that means rebates for efficient new autos paid for by fees on inefficient ones. In its first 2 years, the biggest of 5 European feebate or bonus-malus systems tripled the speed of improving auto efficiency. That was in France. And the resulting shift to electric autos is going to be as game-changing as shifting from small refinements in typewriters to the dramatic Moore's Law-driven gains in computers. Of course, IT is now our biggest industry. Typewriter makers have vanished. So vehicle fitness, taking the obesity out of the car, opens up a powerful new automotive competitive strategy that doubles the expected oil savings in 40 years, but also makes affordable the electrification that can save the rest of the oil. Many different countries could lead this next automotive revolution. The formidable barriers are much more cultural than they're technological or economic, and we're helping both the automakers and the supply chain to tackle them. The current leader is Germany. This year, Volkswagen began ramping up low-volume production of this 2-seat carbon fiber plug-in hybrid, getting 0.9 diesel liters per 100 kilometers. And BMW began ramping mid-volume production of this carbon fiber battery electric car. They said its carbon fiber is paid for by needing fewer batteries, and their CEO said we do not intend to be a typewriter maker, because he can look across München to where Olympia used to make excellent typewriters. Audi recently showed a carbon fiber plug-in hybrid concept vehicle rated like this one at 0.9 liters per 100 kilometers, but it's an SUV. Now, 7 years ago, an even faster and cheaper technology developed by one of our spin-offs made this carbon cap in less than 1 minute. And if I hit it, you can tell it's extremely strong and stiff. Rings like a bell. So it's stronger and stiffer than steel, a third the weight, tougher than titanium. Tom Friedman, the journalist, hit it as hard as he could with a sledgehammer and couldn't even make a mark on it. So don't worry about dropping it. I brought along another piece that was recently made that's induction welded. And it's now possible to make a 2x2 meter complex part with such techniques in 1 minute. So such techniques, which are, well, in various forms available now from 17 firms, can scale to automotive cost and speed with essentially aerospace performance. Adoption could save 4/5 of the capital needed for automaking and could save a lot of lives because these materials can absorb 6 to 12 times as much crash energy as steel per kilo. They could save oil equivalent in the US alone to 1.5 Saudis or half an OPEC that we would find by drilling in a very prospective play called the Detroit Formation. There's a lot of negabarrels down there, and they cost $18 a barrel because it's just to pay for the electrification. The ultralighting is essentially free, paid for by simpler automaking and a much smaller powertrain. And of course, the negabarrels are domestic, secure, carbon-free, and inexhaustible. The lightest announced carbon fiber family car is this plug-in hybrid concept car that Toyota showed 6 years ago. It has the interior volume of a Prius, half the fuel use, 1/3 the weight, 420 kilograms. And that, I think, is a sign of things to come. Now, the same physics and the same business logic apply also to heavy vehicles. Walmart last year used 44% less fuel than in 2005 to move a case in its giant fleet of heavy trucks. And the full technological potential to improve the Class 8 trucks is a tripling of efficiency. If you combine that with the triple to quintupled efficiency airplanes being designed at places like Boeing and NASA and MIT, then the U.S. would save nearly $1 trillion worth of fuel on the heavy vehicles. And in both light and heavy vehicles, these technical revolutions in efficiency are being driven by the military revolution in efficiency. It's going to make that faster, much as military R&D already gave us the internet, the global positioning system, the jet engine industry, the microchip industry. Only this time it will be leveraging oil savings in the civilian sector, which uses over 50 times as much oil, and that will help get big oil-guzzling countries like mine off oil much faster, so that we needn't fight over the oil, and then our warfighters can have neg emissions in the Persian Gulf, mission unnecessary. They really like that idea. Now, as we design and build vehicles better, we can also use them a lot smarter. This is a graph of U.S. traffic congestion with the morning and evening rush hours. And if that were an electricity load shape, we would be using a lot of IT-enabled pricing and smart grid and demand response to try to flatten those peaks. But by not yet doing this for road traffic, we are wasting many billions of dollars a year in idle people, idle vehicles, and idle roads. But instead of just standing back and watching driving double as officially forecast, we could eliminate needless driving by combining 4 very powerful techniques. Namely, we can charge real-time driving costs per kilometer, not per liter. We can use smart IT to enhance public transport and empower car sharing and ride sharing and smart parking. We can allow lucrative smart growth real estate models that help people be already where they want to be so they don't need to go somewhere else. That's more profitable for the developer, and we can also use IT to make traffic free flowing. So by combining those proven methods, the U.S. could get the same access and mobility, or better, with 46 to 84% less driving, saving another $0.3 trillion, plus another $0.3 trillion from smarter use of trucks. So 40 years from now, a much more mobile U.S. economy could be using no oil, and saving or displacing each barrel for $25 a barrel rather than buying it for way over $100 a barrel saves $4 trillion net present value, or if we counted just the hidden economic and military costs of U.S. oil dependence, that would be $12 trillion. And that still doesn't count any costs to health, safety, environment, climate, global stability and development, or our nation's independence and reputation. So to get mobility without oil, to phase out the oil, we can first get efficient, adding to the government forecast savings, the new ones from vehicle fitness and more productive use of vehicles. And then those 1 or 2 liter per 100 kilometer autos can run on any mixture of hydrogen, electricity, and advanced biofuel. The heavy trucks and airplanes could realistically run on advanced biofuel or hydrogen, or the trucks could run on natural gas, but none of them will need oil. And the needed biofuels, if any, are such a small number they could be made 2/3 from waste and without needing any cropland or harming soil or climate. So our little team speeds these oil savings by what we call institutional acupuncture. If the business logic is congested and not flowing properly, we insert little needles into selected points in partners like Ford and Walmart and the Pentagon to get that chi, that entrepreneurial juice, flowing properly. And this long transition is well enough underway that even 4 years ago, some analysts were starting to see peak oil not in supply but in demand. Because as happened to whale oil in the 1850s, oil is becoming uncompetitive even at low prices before it becomes unavailable even at high prices. But the electric autos that help that happen need not add new burdens to the electricity system. Rather, when smart autos exchange electricity and information through smart buildings with smart grids, they are adding to the grid flexibility and storage that help the grid to accept varying solar and wind power. So it becomes easier to solve the auto and electricity problems together than separately. And the electric autos also converge the oil story with our second big story, saving electricity and then making it differently. And these twin revolutions in electricity promise more numerous, diverse, and profound disruptions than in any other sector, because we've got 21st century technology and speed colliding head-on with 20th and even 19th century institutions, rules, and cultures. Indeed, these disruptions are taking us in exactly the opposite direction to this familiar image of lots of electricity being brought from giant stations far away. The market is taking us the other way. Now, changing how we make electricity gets easier if we need less of it. Today, most of it is wasted, and the technologies for saving it keep improving faster than we can install them. So the unbought reserves of negawatts, saved watts, keep getting bigger and cheaper. But as buildings and industry start to catch up and get efficient faster than they grow, the demand for, say, U.S. electricity, instead of growing 1% a year as officially forecast, could shrink 1% a year even after allowing for the extra use for those efficient electric cars. And something like this, only more so, seems to be already happening, because last year alone in the United States, the weather-adjusted electricity used to make $1 of real GDP fell by 3.4% in 1 year. Unprecedented. But we can keep demand dropping by reasonably accelerating existing trends. Over the next 40 years, U.S. buildings, which I'll remind you use 3/4 of our electricity, could triple or quadruple their energy productivity, saving $1.4 trillion net present value with a 33% internal rate of return. The savings are worth 4 times their costs. And industry can also accelerate and double its energy productivity with a 21% internal rate of return. So to do those things by 2050, we would just need by 2030 to ramp up the national average levels of efficiency adoption to what our Pacific Northwest states already achieved 8 years ago. There is a disruptive innovation we call integrative design that can do even better, because it often makes very large energy savings cost less than small or no savings, turning diminishing returns into expanding returns. That's how our retrofit 3 years ago is saving 2/5 of the energy in the Empire State Building. We started off by remanufacturing all 6,500 windows on a temporary 5th floor window factory into super windows that are 3 times more insulating and let light come through but block heat. Those plus other improvements reduced the maximum cooling load by 1/3, and that made us able to save enough capital to pay for most of these improvements by renovating smaller chillers rather than adding bigger chillers. That capital saving reduced the payback time to just 3 years. By the way, a major energy service company had also offered a 3-year payback, but their savings would be 6 times smaller because they did disintegrated design, optimizing components separately while we optimized the whole building as a system. We've just finished the cost-effective retrofit of a difficult 48-year-old federal office building, which is expected to cut energy use by 70%, making it probably more efficient than the most efficient new U.S. office building. That's how fast the state-of-the-art is moving. Now let's look at a different sort of building. My wife Judy and I live in this house at 2,200 meters elevation near Aspen, Colorado, high in the Rocky Mountains, where the lowest temperature could be as low as minus 44 Celsius. And we've had up to 39 days of continuous cloud in midwinter. This is actually an archetype that helped inspire the 30,000 or more European passive buildings, which, like ours, have and need no heating system, but have roughly normal construction cost. And they can look like whatever you want. They don't need to look like this to work like this. Now, let's come into this central atrium, and under the special glass, which insulates like 14 sheets of glass, this is what the middle of the house looked like in a February snowstorm 2 years ago. You can see 2 of the 5 banana crops that were then ripening with no heating system. In fact, here's our new banana crop number 48, here's number 46 and 47. Passive solar banana crops. These actually weighed 30 kilos and harvested themselves in March or so by pulling down the tree. Now, when I moved into this house in 1984, it was saving about 99% of the usual space and water heating energy, about 90% of the household electricity, and about half the water. And it was all paying for itself in the first 10 months. That was using 1983 technology. Well, today's is a lot better, so we've now retrofitted it and we're measuring about 300 data streams to see how much better. The trouble is that the measuring equipment seems to be using more electricity than the lights and appliances we're measuring. A similar design has been used to eliminate air conditioning up to 46 Celsius, not a limit, with better comfort and lower construction cost. And it's been used in steamy Bangkok to save about 90% of the air conditioning energy with normal construction cost and lower and better comfort. So probably almost everyone in the world lives in a climate somewhere between Bangkok and this place in Colorado. But wherever you are, the key is to get multiple benefits from single expenditures. So this white arch holding up the middle of our house has 12 different functions, but only one cost. Integrative design can also increase the $500 billion of conventional energy savings in U.S. industry. Dow has already captured $9 billion of energy savings on a $1 billion investment. But there's much more to do. For example, 3/5 of the world's electricity runs motors, half of that runs pumps and fans, and we can make motors, pumps, and fans much better. But first we should capture bigger and cheaper savings that are normally ignored and are not yet in any of the engineering textbooks. For example, the biggest user of motor power is pumping, moving liquids through pipes. But a standard industrial pumping loop was redesigned by a Dutch colleague to use at least 86% less pumping energy, not by improving the pumps and motors and controls, but just by replacing long, thin, crooked pipes with fat, short, straight pipes. And in the process, the pumping equipment gets smaller and the total capital cost goes down. Actually, we did something like this in some new piping in our own house and saved 99% or so of the pumping energy at lower cost. So this is not new technology. This is just rearranging our metal furniture as designers, rediscovering Victorian engineering. And what does this mean for the electricity that's 3/5 used in motors? Well, if you put 100 units of, say, coal into the power plant, there are so many compounding losses that only 1/10 of that energy comes out the pipe as flow. But now we can turn those compounding losses around backwards from right to left, and they become compounding savings. And when we save 1 unit of flow or friction in the pipe, it compounds back again to save 10 units of fuel and cost and pollution back at the power station, as well as what Hunter Lovins calls global weirding, and at the same time the components as you go upstream get smaller and cheaper. Now, our team has lately found such snowballing energy savings in over $40 million worth of diverse industrial redesigns, from a Hewlett-Packard data center and Texas Instruments chip fab to Rio Tinto and Anglo-American mines and Shell hydrocarbon facilities and many others. And typically our retrofit designs can save about 30 to 60% of the energy with a 2 or 3 year payback, and our new facility designs save a bit more, say 40 to 90%, but almost always at lower capital cost. Of course, needing less electricity would ease and speed the shift to new sources of electricity, especially modern renewables. China is leading their explosive growth and their plummeting costs, shown here on a logarithmic scale for solar photovoltaic modules, which have fallen off the bottom of the chart, and for wind farms. And these technologies, when put in good sites, now actually outcompete even the supposedly cheap frack gas in the United States. So they're marketplace winners, and that's even though they're generally subsidized less than non-renewables are. In Germany, the installed solar power systems cost only half what they cost in the United States. We all buy the same equipment, but the German installers are much more efficient. And therefore, today, even at twice the German price, remarkably, in at least 20 of the United States, entrepreneurs can come to your house and put solar power on your roof with no down payment and beat your electric bill. Soon the no down payment, no money down, will turn into cash back as the costs continue to fall. And such unregulated products could ultimately add up to a virtual utility that could bypass the electric company, just as wireless phones bypass the wireline telephone companies. This gives electricity executives nightmares and venture capitalists sweet dreams. Or the incumbent electricity providers could turn the insurgency into a major business opportunity, and we're working with both sides to do that. In fact, our institute has convened an E-Lab, or Electricity Innovation Lab, with 40-odd industry leaders to figure out the new business and revenue and regulatory models, grid integration, grid security, all the key elements of the next electricity industry. For example, we've helped a little Colorado utility devise a bidirectional value tariff where the utility and the customers pay each other the fair value of the services they exchange, thus solving the unscalability of net metering. Now here's the big picture. Worldwide, starting in 2008, half the world's added electric capacity each year has been renewable. And this graph shows the amount of wind and photovoltaic capacity added each year. Probably this year solar will cross over wind. And these are very large numbers because electricity production has become a scalable, mass-produced, manufactured product, much more like microchips and computers than like building cathedrals. We used to think you had to take 10 years and billions of dollars to build a power station. But now in those 10 years, you can build each year a photovoltaic factory, which each year thereafter will produce enough solar cells that each year that one factory's production for 1 year worth of solar cells will produce as much electricity as your big power plant would have produced. So that's why solar cells are scaling faster than cell phones. The capacity to make them is now about 75 billion watts a year, twice the installation rate, although it's going to catch up quickly thanks to China. And worldwide, in each of the past 2 years, these modern renewables, not counting big hydro, have got $250 billion of private investment and added over 80 billion watts of capacity. They've already surpassed 2 years ago the total installed capacity of nuclear power in the world. Its dwindling annual net additions actually went negative before Fukushima. And worldwide, the orders for nuclear and coal plants are dwindling because they have no business case. They have too much cost and too much risk to attract investors. And indeed, the U.S. has just abandoned 5 operating and 9 planned nuclear units so far this year because just their operating cost cannot compete anymore with the wholesale power price driven down by renewables. Now, we are told that only giant coal and nuclear plants can keep the lights on because they are 24/7, whereas photovoltaic and wind power are variable and thus supposedly unreliable. But both parts of that statement are incorrect. This graph shows for a stormy winter month in France, that nation's output of wind power in red, and the blue curve is the forecast of the output 1 day ahead. I'll bet we wish we could forecast demand that well. Also, no generator is 24/7. They all break. And when a giant unit fails, as they do maybe an eighth of the time, you suddenly lose 1,000 megawatts in milliseconds, often for weeks or months and often without warning. That's why we've always designed the grid to back up failed plants with working plants, to cope with this intermittency of the big thermal plants. And in exactly the same way, the grid can manage the forecastable variations in photovoltaic and wind power. That is, you diversify the portfolio of these variable resources by type and location, you forecast them, you integrate them with all the other renewables, which are dispatchable, that means you can have them whenever you want. You integrate them with demand response, you integrate them with distributed storage, and that's enough without bulk storage. Let me illustrate this with a rather difficult case for the power pool that serves the state of Texas and is isolated from the rest of the United States. In 2050, you would expect during a summer week to have a load shape like this, or less and less peaky if you use the electricity in a way that saves money. Now, let's meet all of this with renewables. First with wind, then with solar power, and you can see how much they actually vary. And then, having done 86% of the generation this way, we'll do the other 14% with dispatchable renewables that can run anytime, like geothermal, small hydro, solar thermal electric with heat storage so they can run into and even through the night, burning municipal solid waste, burning energy studies, burning feedlot biogas in combustion turbines. So now we're 100% renewable, but you can see it doesn't match the load shape very well. But now we can take the surpluses and put them into two kinds of distributed storage, both fully deployed, namely ice storage, air conditioning, and smart charging of electric vehicles. Then we can recover that distributed storage when we want it and fill in the last bits with unobtrusively flexible demand, and now we have reliable power supply every hour of the year with no bulk storage and with only 5% of the renewable generation left over, so the economics should be very good. Now, some utilities already are doing this. It's not just theory. They're doing this choreography of variable renewables. Last year, Germany had 23% renewable electricity and Denmark 41%, and they had the most reliable power in Europe, about 10 times the reliability of the United States electric system. The first half of this year, Spain has been 48% renewable electricity, and Portugal a remarkable 70%, up from 17% in just 8 years. Now the European vision of all renewable electricity is starting to look realistic and has been adopted or achieved as a goal in at least one sector, sometimes in all, by 8 countries, 42 cities, 49 regions, 8 utilities, 21 institutions. A sixth of Germans already live in communities or regions that expect to have all renewable electricity or that already do. Now, Denmark illustrates another important part of this story. Over 30 years, they've gone from a few centralized coal plants to a constellation of wind power in blue, 86% owned by the farmers, just as 2/3 of German renewables are owned by citizens and communities. And the rest of the Danish capacity is combined heat and power running on agricultural waste in general. And Denmark's conservative government is planning and on track to achieve wholly renewable energy, not just electricity, but all kinds, by 2050 at essentially no extra cost. Denmark is also reorganizing its grid into microgrids, a cellular architecture that can make cascading blackouts impossible. Now, in America, we have this aging, dirty, and insecure electricity system that we must replace by 2050. And whatever we replace it with will cost about the same, about $6 trillion net present value. Whether we buy more of what we now have, or new nuclear and so-called clean coal, or centralized renewables, or more distributed renewables. They all cost about the same, but they differ profoundly in their risks around security, technology, finance, fuel, water, climate, and health. So this is a risk management play. For example, our over-centralized grid is vulnerable to cascading and potentially economy-shattering blackouts caused by operational problems, bad space weather, bad earth weather, earthquakes, physical attack, cyber attack. But this blackout risk disappears and all the other risks are best managed with distributed renewables reorganized into microgrids that normally exchange power freely but can stand alone at need, so they can disconnect fractally, reconnect seamlessly. Our house works this way. The lights stay on whether the grid is working or not. This is also the Pentagon's strategy for military power supply, because they need their stuff to work. Well, how about the rest of us whom they're defending? We need this level of security too, national, community, and individual. And at about the same cost as business as usual, this resilient grid architecture can maximize security at all levels and customer choice and entrepreneurial opportunity and innovation. So let me summarize the electricity story. Electric companies just used to build giant coal and nuclear and sometimes gas plants and a little bit of efficiency of renewables. especially when we rewarded those companies, as we do throughout Europe and in 35 of the United States, for selling us more electricity. But where we've changed the rules in 15 states to reward the utilities for cutting our bills, not for selling us more electricity, the investment goes the other way up. It shifts massively towards efficiency, renewables, combined heat and power, distributed storage, smart grids, ways to blend them all together reliably. And especially this is true in the 30 or so United States where all ways to save electricity or to use it at more convenient times bid into the same auctions as electricity supply. And in our biggest power pool, there was a recent auction where the demand side options got 94% of the winning bids. So our energy future is not fate but choice, and that choice is very flexible. In 1975, in my country, government and industry all insisted that the energy needed to make $1 of gross domestic product could never go down. So it was considered heretical when I said it could actually go down threefold. How did we do? Well, it's gone down by over half so far. And today, with much better technologies costing 3 times less for efficiency, and with integrated design and better financing and marketing and delivery channels, we can see very clearly how to save 2/3 of what's left at even lower cost. So to solve the energy problem, we just needed to enlarge it and integrate it. The results may seem astonishing. They even surprised us a bit. But, you know, as Marshall McLuhan said, only puny secrets, small, weak secrets need protection. Big discoveries, you say, are protected by public incredulity. So now combine the electricity and oil revolutions, and you have the really big story, reinventing fire, where business enabled and sped by smart policies and mindful markets can lead a country like the United States, and perhaps your country, completely off oil and coal by 2050, saving trillions of dollars, growing the economy 2.6-fold, and by eliminating the oil and coal, cutting fossil carbon emissions by 82 to 86%. Now, if you like any one or more of those outcomes, you could support this transition without having to like every outcome and without having to agree about which outcome is most important. So focusing on outcomes, not motives, can turn gridlock and conflict into a unifying solution to our common energy challenge, and can also provide the most effective solutions to the big global problems that put at risk every country's security and prosperity. At our nonprofit Rocky Mountain Institute, we're helping smart companies to get unstuck and speed this journey through a variety of sectoral initiatives and projects. Of course, there is still a lot of old thinking around too, on both sides of the Atlantic and Pacific. As the former oilman Maurice Strong said, not all the fossils are in the fuel. But as Maurice Strong said when he led DuPont, he was chairman, firms hampered by old thinking won't be a problem. Because in the long run, he said, they simply won't be around. What I've described here is not just a once-in-a-civilization business opportunity. It's one of the greatest transformations in the whole history of our species, because we humans are inventing a new fire, not dug from below, but flowing from above. I've even heard theologians talk about energy from hell and energy from heaven. And the new fire is quite different. It is not scarce but bountiful, not local but everywhere, not transient but permanent, not costly but free. And except for the transitional tail of natural gas and a little biofuel grown in ways that sustain and endure, this new fire is flameless. And efficiently used, it really could make energy do our work without working our undoing. Every nation, firm, city, community, citizen owns a piece of that enormous prize. And our book, Reinventing Fire, details how to capture that opportunity. And now Rocky Mountain Institute has partnered with 3 leading organizations that are in or closely collaborating with the central government of China to bring this thinking into China's strategic planning process and to learn from China's remarkable experience. So with the conversation begun at reinventingfire.com, let me invite each of you to engage with us, with each other, with everyone around you, to help make the world healthier, richer, fairer, cooler, and safer by together reinventing fire. Thank you for your good work and your kind attention.